我哋繼續啊。咁
Yes. Shall we have the administration bring us through the paper? Yes, good morning, Mr. Lau. Yes, good morning, Chair. This paper is about the creation of a non-civil service executive director position in the financial services branch. Perhaps I should provide some background because we do have certain members who are relatively new. Now, in January of 2003, the office was set up, and that is the Financial Services Development Council. Basically, it has a role of advising the government on strategies and measures where the financial markets meeting with challenges, and also advises the government as to how the financial market should expand and grow. Now, in 2013 November, they have come up with a number of reports, and as of to date, they have had turned out 23 reports in different areas, in REIT, in taxation, in asset management, RMB development, etc. So they have come up with a series of very constructive suggestions. And we have also reported the same to the LegCo members. And in January of this year, when we came to this panel, the members who are concerned about this area have suggested that the government provides more resources to the Financial Services Development Council so that it can do more research on various aspects, including Hong Kong as an offshore RMB hub. And therefore, in the past, after some studies, we found that we have had to beef up the secretariat of the FSDC. We needed people who are familiar with the workings of the government and also of the markets to support the work of the FSDC. Mrs. Laura Cha had come to the LegCo to talk about the workings of the FSDC. The work is very much undertaken by the working groups, by the members of the FSDC, but at the same time, the Secretariat supports that work and provides a lot of the supportive work. And therefore, we propose to create a post of D2 level with a 3-year term to lead the Secretariat and support the work of the FSDC in its professional work and also to achieve its purpose of setup. Yes. Concerning this non-civil service executive director position, any views, please, members? Mr. Shek, then Mr. Chan Kim Po. I'm in support of this proposal, Chair, but I'm wondering why the government is not coming up with this proposal until now. Why not at the time of the setup of the FSDC, please? Have you lost a lot of opportunities by so doing? Is it only now that you find that such supportive work is necessary? And when the FSDC was first set up, who was responsible for such work? Or was such work not done at all? Well, actually, when we set up the FSDC in January of 2013, we have from the Hong Kong MA and also the Securities and Futures Commission and also from the Trade Development Council, we have seconded 3 relatively senior staff members to the Secretariat of the FSDC to take up research work. And from then, that is 2013, the Secretariat had worked very smoothly. The work of the Secretariat was really to support the work of the members and the council of the FSDC and also the working groups of the FSDC. The FSDC came up with a series of reports. The government took some on board and amended certain ordinances and legislation, etc. So it is not a case of insufficient staffing at the Secretariat and not being able to provide value. But in the past years of development, especially in the financial markets, starting from 2008 with its fluctuations and volatility, and in the recent years, the development of the RMB offshore center and some newer developments such as green finance, fintech, etc. With all these developments in the past couple of years, we therefore, in our paper, we have set out that starting from August of this year, we have invited Mr. Lee to be our senior advisor for a term of 1 year. It is exactly because we saw the need to strengthen the support to the FSDC. Now, Mr. Wu is leading the Secretariat team right now, but in terms of market research, market liaison, and market promotion, we need some more support for the work of the FSDC and its chairman, Mrs. Cha. And therefore, we have proposed this non-civil service executive director in a bridging solution with a finite term. And this time, we see that this post will beef up our capabilities in research, market development, and promotion. So after the term is completed for the senior advisor, we will go to the market for open recruitment to see who best can fulfill that role, someone with experience in financial markets development, so as to give us smooth and strong support. Now, Chair, the Hong Kong MA had done a lot of work, which is all beneficial to the Hong Kong financial markets. My question is, perhaps this is a little bit deviating from the question here, but how do you look at the Hong Kong MA, the consultation paper? It seems that there are some contravening views. Are you talking about the Hong Kong MA or the FSDC? The FSDC, actually, all right. Well, for the consultation issued by the FSDC, which came out about a month ago, we analyzed, basically set out our views. The response to the proposal is that we are in support of market reform. It is the right way forward. But we also set out our analysis, and that is in the LRC, the difference between the LRC and LPC, we feel that the LPC is important in its role because in policy and strategy development, it is important, and it is a good arrangement. But for the LRC, now I'm speaking on behalf of the FSDC, and at the time the FSDC held certain reservations concerning the LRC, and our analysis was that the present workflow and the future workflow in terms of streamlining, efficiency, we had certain reservations, queries, and we had certain views which we made known to the Hong Kong Exchange and also to the SFC. Mr. Chair, why do we have to find someone from the market, from the industry, to fill this role? Well, the SFC and the Hong Kong Exchange made a mess of it, especially for the SFCO. It sets out very clearly the terms of reference of the SFC. It's not about promotion of the market. So in finding someone, I hope you not only find someone who will promote the market, but to regulate, but also to look into whether these organizations had held back the growth and development of the market. Mr. Chair, perhaps I should mention, because it's raised by Mr. Sheck, regulation. Now, the FSDC is an advisory body. We have no regulatory responsibilities whatsoever, but our chair and our members do have close communication and interaction with the regulatory bodies. So we will forward our views to them. Chen Kim-po. Well, of course, the FSDC is very important to the financial market development of Hong Kong. And so far, they've turned out 23 research reports. I'm in support of this in front of us today. But, well, research reports important, but to implement them is also important. In the future, would you also go into implementation as well, so that these very good views that you turn out will bear fruit in Hong Kong? From the FSDC's point of view, our reports are given to the chief executive, and from there it goes to certain departments of the government as well. And we will look at the proposals in the reports. Now I'm wearing another hat. I'm wearing the hat of the Financial Services and Treasury Department, Deputy Under Secretary. Now, the FSDC, when they produce these reports, they first talk to the people in the market, and they represent the views of certain sectors of the market. And as the government receives these views and reports, we will go to the regulatory bodies and a wide segment of the market, and we adopt certain of the views laid out in the reports, and we come to the LegCo for amendments of ordinances. We've done that before, especially in taxation and also in adjustment of the markets. We've done that before. Now, certain further examples. Green finance, case in point, the FSDC suggests that the Hong Kong government should issue bonds, take the lead, and provide a model for the market to follow. The government, as you all know very well, that when we issue bonds, we have to consider, apart from providing an example for green finance, we also have to come to the LegCo. For example, the Islamic finance, we had to specifically amend our legislation and issue bonds. I-bond, similarly. But these are specific and for special purposes. But for green finance, do we need to issue bonds for green finance? At the time, the government, and we've also talked to the chair as well, we were of the thinking that we can encourage the public utilities in Hong Kong to issue such bonds. So for the FSDC, they have also been talking to these public utilities and public organizations, including, let's say, the MTRC. The MTRC had also been issuing bonds. We have also talked to the airport authority. They are positive in their response. They are considering issuing such bonds in the coming years. So when you're talking about implementation of the reports, when the government consider this, apart from the market, we also think about the amendment of legislation at the LegCo, the whole series of things, and we prioritize them in our implementation of the suggestions in the reports.
Mr. Chen, I hope that when implementing these measures, the FSDB would step up the manpower, because we haven't seen much progress in some of the projects. Starry Lee. Chairman, I support this proposal like Mr. Abraham Sheck. I'd like to put a question here. Here, according to the paper, you'd like to create a post with other support team members being seconded from other departments. What's going to happen in a year's time, what's the prospect of the FSDC after being operational for some time and after publishing a number of reports which met pretty good response from the market. I know that Ms. Laura Cha mentioned to us that they have to have the secondees from other departments. Now, what is your consideration? Is the best way forward with the creation of these posts? The secondees are secondees, and they have a different sense of belonging. We may not be able to get the best sense of belonging there. Mr. Lau. Chairman, thanks very much for the question. We've been discussing with Mrs. Laura Cha about the personnel arrangement of the FSDC. We don't have to wait for another year. We keep this under constant review. I'd like to say that with regard to the secondment arrangement, it does provide some advantages. We carry out a lot of work that has to do with the SFC and the Hong Kong MA. We do have liaison with them in terms of the formulation of policies and the launching of new products like fintech and so on. They have to do with them. So when we have the secondees over to the FSDC, it would be easier for them to get in touch with the Hong Kong MA or the SFC because they find this so much easier with the experience behind them. And they also have the experience of a regulator behind them. So it does have some positive effect. Chairman, my time is pretty tight. Beg your pardon, Under Secretary. This arrangement is deliberate. And as you said that you keep this under constant review, but you think that secondment is the best possible arrangement, isn't it? Now, FSDC was set up in 2013, so you're going to have the duration of 3 years plus 3 years, and the FSDC will promote Hong Kong's status as an international financial center. You have similar organization in the UK, but what about the long-term prospect? What is your thinking there for the long term? Under Secretary? Let me take the manpower issue first before I talk about the future. We did try to hire our own people at the FSDC, but we don't have a large establishment for professionals. We only have 3 posts, and now we have another one dealing with the internet. Now we find it very difficult to hire the right number of people, although we do know that there is such talent in the market. But this is, to put it crudely, a dead end, a cul-de-sac. There is no career progression. We hire them maybe for 3 years, but they would rather join a more suitable organization. We did consider this. If the FSDC were to mount their own recruitment, would they be able to recruit and retain the talents? When we discussed this with Chairman Cha, we also had regard to the UK, the investment chain, and all these new organizations that are coming on stream that are more like the Invest Hong Kong and the FSDC, and they bring them all together. But the funding, to a large extent, comes from the market itself. In Hong Kong, when the chairman discussed with the relevant people, and it is found that it would be not easy for the funding to be coming from the market itself. So that's why we're still relying on the government funding. It's more like the pump priming. we would certainly consider members' view and see how best we're going to have a sustainable long-term resource and manpower arrangement. Mr. Ronick Chen. Chairman, I support this proposal to increase the manpower at the FSDC because it is looking at green finance and R&B internationalization. It is an important platform. During the consultation on the policy address, I made the point with the CE's office that the FSDC's resources should be stepped up. So Ms. Starley has put a lot of the questions that I would like to have put. Is it possible to build on the existing structure? Like Mr. Chen Kim-po said, after the studies, you can take the findings forward. Now, if I may put a question here, in 2017 Q3, the candidate will be imposed. I assume that the post will be filled in July 2017, but the original consultant would be gone, and there would be a very short handover period with such a post. I find the handover period rather short. Perhaps the candidate can be imposed a little bit earlier so that there can be a longer period for the handover. This post holder would be very instrumental to the provision of services to the FSDC. Under Secretary, yes, indeed, we will follow up on the findings at FSDC and also at the government level. As to the assumption of the post, we have to go to the establishment subcommittee and the finance committee. We have to go through the entire process, which will take a couple of months. We'd like to get this done as soon as possible. This is an open recruitment. It is a D2 post. So we have to go through all the due process, which is pretty rigorous. I have heard what the honourable member had to say. I will try to look at the time the post is filled. Perhaps let's hope that we can identify the candidate as soon as possible. It would take at least 3 months for these people to give notice to quit their own job. And we have to go through the recruitment, which allow them to serve notice to leave their own post. Q3 2017 would be an appropriate arrangement. The sooner the better, of course. Where if you have the appropriate talent, you can buy him out. You've got some residual time. You'd like to utilize this? No, Chairman. Mr. Wuchiwai next, please. Chairman. Some of the members are supportive, but I like to be the odd one out. I object to this. Unless you can tell us that the FSDC is considering becoming a super regulator to monitor the SFC or the Hong Kong MA, I cannot see this being anything other than providing advice or providing consultation or reference information to the community. I just can't see that it has such a massive function or role for this post to be created at the FSDC Secretariat. The FSTB is providing the secretarial support for the FSDC. The people are coming from the SFC and the Hong Kong MA. I think it is an appropriate arrangement. There is no actual need for someone to be hired to head the FSDC. So my question is it the case that with the recruitment of this person, you're going to confer upon the FSDC a role that is far superior than what it is at the moment? If it is the same role, then I don't see the need for this person. If it goes beyond the original intention, then we have to discuss the role and positioning of the FSDC. Now, this is a 3-year tenure. I cannot see how you can achieve the effectiveness of the role of the FSDC with the inclusion of this particular post. Under Secretary. Chairman, thanks very much for the question. As we said in the introduction, the FSDC is an advisory body. Now, why is it that with the achievements that we've made over the years in the financial sector, we still need to have this executive director in the FSDC? The key thing is over the past 2 years, we have seen turmoil in the financial market. We have seen a great deal of developments. Well, that much I know, Mr. Undersecretary. Do you have a new role for the FSDC? The Hong Kong MA has to deal with the new developments, like the sandbox and the new ideas. Is it the case that all these new ideas cannot be undertaken by the Hong Kong MA? It has to be taken forward by the FSDC. Can you be more specific about the details? Now, let's say the sandbox, for instance, the supervisory sandbox. The Hong Kong MA last Friday they had the blockchain report together with S3. I mean, they have this report on blockchain. SFC, on the other hand, they have set up the contact point. There is a contact office that would take on board the views, the input from the market. The FSDC has the value-added role. We have set up 2 committees on fintech as well as on blockchain. Now, the Hong Kong MA is dealing with the banking sector, whereas the SFC is dealing with the equities and asset management sector, the trading of the equities and so on. The FSDC set up a cross-discipline committee to look at the blockchain and the fintech. As a financial center, there are certain elements that the 2 bodies do not touch on, and that is the startups. In Hong Kong, we have the cyberport, and we have the accelerator, the incubators, that are helping the startups. But in Hong Kong, from the FSDC's point of view, we do need to have a cross-sectoral study to look at the impact that these would have on the market and also the structure. The blockchain came from the hub-and-spoke model, if I may, Chairman. If the administration feels that they should look at this direction, you would have done it at the bureau level. Why do you have to farm this out to the FSDC? Fintech, for instance, the sector would like the government to have some innovative thinking, but the problem doesn't lie with the thinking itself. The problem lies with the determination to break through the different layers and get things done. So I think more specifically, if you have identified this direction, the FSTB should really take on the study itself instead of putting this to the FSDC. Undersecretary, indeed, the government is doing this. At the beginning of this year, we have set up a steering committee on the development of fintech that falls within our bureau. Well, that's a duplication of resources. It should have been done in your bureau, isn't it? Yes, that's correct. To answer your question, the member asked about the role of the FSDC. I said that the government is doing its work. The FS said in the budget that there would be further development of fintech and blockchain, and the Hong Kong MA is looking at this at the banking level. They have the sandbox, the OCI, the SFC, and the FSDC have set up a contact point for the market players to discuss with the FSDC. Now, if it is about the banking sector, they go to the Hong Kong MA. If it is about the equities, they go to the SFC. But the FSDC is more like cross-sectoral. And it is looking at things from the market's point of view. What time is running short? Will you make it brief, please? Well, I have to address this question, Chairman. So it is the role of the FSDC to look at the cross-sectoral issues from the market point of view, in terms of the blockchain, in terms of the fintech. What impact would they have on Hong Kong? And we have someone seconded from the TDC, and the TDC is doing a lot of promotion for the service sector. And the FSDC would join these promotional initiatives for people to understand what is on offer in Hong Kong. So from the market point of view, the FSDC does have a role to play, which is different from the government's role. As to whether it would become a super regulator, that would be a very big subject altogether. Because this would require the legislative backing. The world over, they have different regulatory models. Some would a single layer monitoring. Some would have multi level monitoring. In Hong Kong, we have the monitoring or supervision according to a different sector. As to the development of the FSDC, that's something for the future. I have a number of members on this subject, so I restrict members to 5 minutes for the Q&A, or 4 minutes in the interest of time. Mr. Kenneth Leung. Chairman, thank you. Under Secretary, you are wearing two hats, FSDC and also FSTB. Under Secretary, I feel that the communications between the FSDC and the FSTB seems to be falling apart. Now, the report has been laid, and you then said that you're encouraging the public sectors like the MTR to issue bonds. Now, you haven't got the yardstick for the green bonds, and you don't have an incentive or taxation incentive for this to happen. You're asking them to issue bonds. I think this is all sounding pretty hollow. Why is it that things are moving so slowly?
Secondly, I'd like to ask about this recruitment by FSDC. Is FSDC regarded as a legal person, or do you regard it as a private limited company? When recruitment is it done through the FSTB? Who is the contracting party? Those two questions, please. Under Secretary. Chairman, about green financing and the report, we believe time is almost ripe. And to the subject itself, green financing has just been developed throughout the world for 2-3 years. Therefore, in the civil society organization, some of them are concerned about water, electricity, and others energy, construction, pollution, or waste management. So the FSDC report was pitched at a high level. We said we could do it on different aspects, and tax incentives have been mentioned. We know that in the world, In certain countries, in a minority of countries, there are tax breaks, but none has been implemented yet. But we can consider it. In terms of tax incentives, we have to look at how the framework should be. As the government, well, I can disclose that we are studying into this. When you issue a green bond, for example, apart from the subject matter, certification is important. We call it second-party opinion or third-party verification, because when you issue green bonds, you need a second or third party to give you a professional view to certify that it is green. In the UK, they have the Green Investment Bank. And last week, there was news saying that there is a framework proposing. Sorry, Undersecretary, I'm asking you this. If it is issued by the AA or MTRCL, who will do the certification? Probably AA will issue the green bonds next year. Chairman, the airport authority or MTRCL, when they issue bonds, they get European consultancies to do this. When we want to develop Hong Kong into a green financial center, one important thing is that we should have our own certification, such institutions or a framework, so we don't have to rely on people outside Hong Kong. As for manpower, I can give a brief reply. The FSDC is not a legal person. So we, the FSTB, will recruit and we offer non-civil service contract terms, and we are the contracting party. Next, Mr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. In the paper, it tells us why they would like to have this non-civil service executive director post. Details are given. And with regard to the jurisdiction of the FSDC, we have it again for our reference here in the paper. In short, it should study, reflect, and enhance Hong Kong's financial services. Given the manpower resources given to it, I think it's well worth our while, and we should support the post. And our question should not be whether we should finance the post, but rather such jurisdiction can be achieved and realized. If we can, it's worth our while spending even more on it. Now, we have someone standing in the post for now, but we have to think about the long term. We should really hire a suitable person with the relevant qualification and experience to take the post instead of having someone standing in. So I support it. The budget is not a lot of money. It is $2.9 million. Given the present manpower situation in financial services, I actually like to ask whether you can really hire someone with the right experience and qualification given this kind of budgeting. If you really can do it, if the FSDC work can be made more smooth and achieving all the work objectives, I think I can congratulate you. If there are questions, Mr. Chairman. It should be about the progress achieved by the FSDC and its way forward. Maybe we can have another time to receive a report on those. And it is not for us to go into the details today, so I just speak in support of the paper, and I hope at the appropriate time the FSDC can come back and report to us the work progress and their development plan. Do you need a reply? I'm not asking a question, actually. I just speak in support. Maybe suffice to say we should find another time to talk about progress of work. Actually, in January, Mrs. Cha will be coming to talk to members about the work and the work direction of the FSDC. If we already have a date, all the better. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong, Chairman. Mr. C.Y. Leung had wanted to set up 14 bureaus with a Deputy Financial Secretary post and also the Bureau on Culture. But this is like a very strange proposal. I don't know what the FSDC is doing. It's neither fish nor fowl. It is something of a strange object, and now the Undersecretary is watching over it, but this is not enough, so you want someone else. Like Mr. Lo Wai Kwok was saying, you want someone to come and supervise it, and you are spending millions of dollars on the new post. What are you trying to do? Just now, Undersecretary, you read out a lot of stuff. You actually read out the work objectives of the FSDC, but this person is not to do those. It will assist the chairman of the FSDC. It will steer the secretariat and liaise with other financial bodies within government. How can the objectives be achieved? I don't know. The world is changing fast. Well, who would expected Donald Trump to win the election? The financial market is changing so fast. You say you would promote new financial products. As Mr. Norman Chan, he was here. He mentioned many things. SFC, the banking supervisor, the Hong Kong MA, and also the Hong Kong Stock Exchange under Charles Lee. How can you bring any changes to all these 5 bodies by having just an executive director? Can this executive director have any trump card and supervise all these financial institutions? Maybe you are keeping this as a tool for the future. I don't think it's doing anything at present. Undersecretary, how much time has been invested into setting up the FSDC? How much of your time is spent on supervising the FSDC? Undersecretary, our bureau liaises closely with the FSDC, and I am doing the follow-up work as part of government, and we have regular meetings with the chairman of the FSDC. I myself and my staff also take part in the working groups of the FSDC. As to the work of the executive director, well, in simple terms, he assists the chairman and leads the secretariat. But in Annex C, you can see the terms of reference. He should formulate strategies. He should promote the development of the service industry. He should cultivate and strengthen the Council's relationship with regulatory bodies, etc., and promote synergy in the development of new insight. Please don't beat about the bush. I mentioned 5 bodies. The Insurance Authority and the other bodies, they have their own jurisdictions. And this person has no statutory responsibilities. That's very strange. Did you ask Mr. Norman Chan about this? And you are asked to find the money to hire someone whom will be supervised by you to do something. But what is he going to do, and what does Mrs. Cha do? Undersecretary, well, we don't say we supervise their work. This is only said by the member. We advise them. We also provide the strategies for the development of the industries for the consideration of the government. But you are wearing two hats. Are you part of the administration or are you part of the FSDC? You wear two hats, Undersecretary. Undersecretary. Sorry, I don't understand the question. Well, time is almost up. Is there any other member who would like to speak? If not, I'd like to say a few words. Undersecretary, you said that the FSDC issued numerous reports. But we are very disappointed because in those reports, there is no mention as to how SMEs would be supported, especially small and medium-sized brokerages. Do you know how the FSDC came about? It is because when C.Y. Leung ran for the CE post, we raised it with him, and so he set it up when he won the election. Originally, it was for helping SMEs, but all those reports were about macro environment, international issues, and big enterprises. We raised the issue with the CE, but we have not received the attention of FSDC. We think this is very unfair. If you want me to support this non-civil service executive director position, I have a condition, and that is the small and medium-sized brokerages should be the subject of a study report. Then I will support the creation of this post. Also, Undersecretary, you mentioned the paper on listing consultation. The FSDC's report says that it has reservations. Now, to what extent are those reservations about? And if you have reservations about LRC, what about LTC? Because there are people in the sector who would like to actually disregard the entire consultation paper. Everyone has heard their voices. What is the stance of the FSDC on this? Can it have a clearer stance so that the sector understands what the FSDC's role is in this study? Thank you, Chairman. There are two questions. One, small and medium-sized brokerages. Mrs. Cha spoke on this, and she expressed an understanding. At the FSDC Council, there are representatives from small and medium-sized brokerages, and they are also in the working groups. Now, I must say that the representatives are there, but their views have not been included in the reports at all. So what does that mean? It means you do not regard us as important partners. We are there only for a cosmetic effect. Chairman, we can go back and look up the proposals made by such brokerages. My impression is that they have not really put forward anything that is actionable, but I can go back and look at the records. No, Undersecretary, let me tell you something. How would we say that no individual investors should be able to take part in IPO? How would we say something like that? In your report, it is said that it is proposed that no individual investors should be able to take part in IPO, only institutional investors. And then after IPO, we should ask individual investors to pay a premium so that they can get the stocks in the market. How come you wrote such reports? Chairman, the proposal was made because it was from the perspective of protecting investors in the market. It is about a special IPO proposal. Can I also answer your other question, and that is listing consultation? The FSDC's position paper did not support cancelling the entire consultation exercise. It was not our view. We were only commenting on the representativeness about LRC and also that the relationship between the listing committee and LRC should be further clarified. Are there concrete proposals? Yes, they are in the report. I can channel a copy of the report to you and also other members if they are interested. I have to ask them. I don't know about the method of consultation. Well, I haven't got the consultation paper from the FSDC. It is on the web. We can give our position paper for the reference of the chairman and members later on. Okay. Any other members who have a view to express? If that's the case, that's it for this item, please. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for coming and answering questions. Thank you. When you go back, please work very hard for the sake of SMEs. Certainly, Chairman. Let us continue our meeting. Item 7, difficulties encountered by certain enterprises in opening bank accounts. Let us have an introduction from the Hong Kong MA, please. Anyone from the Hong Kong MA? Please walk us through the paper. Thank you, Chairman. We thank the FAP for inviting us to come to the meeting today. This is about difficulties encountered by certain enterprises in opening bank accounts. And I'd like to introduce to you what we have done by way of the Hong Kong MA and the banks. Together with Meaning, I would be explaining the policies to you and also follow-up work done by the banks. And together with my team, I would be taking questions from members afterwards. The Hong Kong MA places emphasis on this because the daily operation of enterprises would need to have bank accounts to pay their employees and do transactions on a daily basis. And we also promote inclusive banking, including individuals and micro companies who should be given bank services. From different channels, we come to understand that some enterprises, especially small and medium enterprises from overseas and also startups, they have encountered difficulties in starting and maintaining bank accounts in Hong Kong. According to the information from the Hong Kong MA, it seems this is not a widespread situation, but it has concentrated on one or two large banks.
And they are the banks which are some of the companies would first go to, and therefore it seems more prevalent than it actually is. Now, the Hong Kong MA had gathered information concerning opening accounts and maintaining accounts at the banks and the specific facts surrounding some of the cases to facilitate our communications with the banks. And we have also conducted various sharing sessions so that the industry and the relevant stakeholders can hold discussions, useful discussions and interactions that would facilitate smoothening of the process and also allowing the Hong Kong MA getting more insight into the situation. And this will also facilitate our providing guidelines to the banks, and Mina will go into the specifics later on. The relevant banks have taken actions to improve their account opening process and providing training to their bank professionals and executives to provide timely and effective communication with the customers, especially with regard to opening of accounts in terms of documentation, where there's a lack of documentation and where the application cases are unsuccessful, that there should be a review mechanism. And we believe that there is positive response from the customers of these banks. There are banks which have pledged for opening of account process to be completed within a month. And basically, for some of the straightforward application cases, it can be completed within 2 weeks. For the more complicated ones, it will take a bit longer. Some of the banks have set up review mechanism according to the client's proposal or suggestion. They have started a review process to see why there are cases which have been turned down. Some of them have been successful in the end. That is, the account had been opened, but there are still situations where the accounts could not be opened, but the banks, under legislation, will have to provide the reason as to why they are not able to open the accounts for the customers. And we know that there are some SMCs from overseas which are extending into their business into Hong Kong, and there are some banks which are extending into the SME community, and there have been a growth in SME customers as well. We have conducted sharing sessions with the SMEs, and the retail banks have been enthusiastic in their participation. We would want the banks to be able to support the developmental needs of the SMEs. The Hong Kong Association of Banks. Yes, can you leave more time? Can you be more brief so that you leave time for questions? Right. And together with Success, we have contacted the SMEs proactively and had provided information to them about banking. Mina can supplement.
Difficulties experienced by I'd like to explain that the difficulties experienced by enterprises in opening bank accounts is part of de-risking, which is a global phenomenon. De-risking means avoiding rather than managing the relevant risks by refusing to open accounts or to continue a banking relationship. The reasons for de-risking are complex and diverse. It is partially due to the progressive tightening of international standards in combating money laundering and terrorist financing in the past few years, which has resulted in extensive enhancements of banks' anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing controls, including customer due diligence for existing and new customers. In view of the above development, the HKMA issued a circular on 8 September entitled De-risking and Financial Inclusion to clarify HKMA's expectation that banks should refrain from adopting practices that will result in financial exclusion, such as indiscriminate application of AML CFT controls. Instead, banks should adopt a risk-based approach and carry out customer due diligence in a balanced manner so that the control measures are proportionate to the risks that exist. We gave examples of disproportionate measures in the annex to the circular. The circular emphasized that a risk-based approach is not a zero-failure regime, and that banks are not required to implement overly stringent customer due diligence processes with a view to eliminating ex ante all risks. Properly applied, the approach should ensure that bona fide businesses, including SMEs and ordinary citizens, have reasonable access to banking services in Hong Kong. We also emphasized in the circular the importance of banks' interface with customers to ensure customers are treated fairly, particularly with respect to transparency, reasonableness, and efficiency. The circular highlighted that there's an increasing interest globally in how technology can assist certain aspects of the customer due diligence process. The HKMA is working with the Industry Association and international setting bodies to reduce some of the burden associated with CDD requirements through innovation in technology, including the use of Know Your Customer utilities in screening account opening applications. Our circular required banks to review their existing processes to ensure consistencies with the supervisory principles contained in the circular, and we're following up with the banks. We also note that apart from local requirements, some banks need to comply with requirements or standards mandated by their head offices and overseas authorities. We have engaged with their head offices and overseas authorities with a view to resolving any possible conflict. For local banks, we've required them to raise the matter to their board of directors, who are expected to play a proactive role in ensuring compliance, not only in terms of processes, but in training frontline staff. We're very happy to note that in response to our circular, some banks have altered their processes to make it more risk-based and, for instance, no longer require customers to fill out a long form and provide information on source of wealth going back decades. Since issuing the circular, we have issued a set of frequently asked questions to clarify issues such as whether banks need to establish source of wealth for all customers, whether all directors and beneficial owners need to be physically present at account opening. We've conducted training for bank senior management and directors and for AML and compliance officers, and these efforts are ongoing. We will continue to work with the industry to manage the relevant risks and promote financial inclusion in Hong Kong, especially for SMEs. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. 嗱，我哋時間緊迫咧，不如我哋其他就書院睇好啦。而家直接俾議員提問，好唔好啊？咁啊。
All right, we will have the Q&A session. We have 4 members who would want to speak. Leung Kai-Chiang, the Vice Chair. Thank you, Chair. Now, the Hong Kong MA has given us an impression in saying that it is only limited to 1 to 2 larger banks which had presented problems for customers in opening banks, and also it involves only overseas SMEs. In fact, in July and August of this year, I have visited a number of accounting firms, and I have come to know that for whether it is large customers or small customers of theirs, they find it hard to open accounts at the banks. And it's been so for the past 3 to 4 years. And Hong Kong, as an international financial center, our reputation is diminished because of this. I know about money laundering and terrorist prevention, but on the other hand, we need to strike a balance. I would like to know, since the issuance of your circular, how has the situation improved? Let's say a foreign entity company coming to Hong Kong to open an account, how long does it actually take? And also for the documentation required by the bank, how has it decreased since the issuance of the circular? Do you have data showing how much the banks have improved? Who will answer that question, please? Yes, I will answer that question, and then the HKAB will talk about the bank's actual operation. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Leung for the question. According to the information we have gathered at the Hong Kong MA, difficulty in opening bank account is not something that's prevalent within the banking industry, but really it is limited to 1 to 2 bigger banks. Now, for anti-money laundering work, we have stepped up with that work, and also among the banks as well. And the due diligence for the customers at the banks have indeed become more stringent in the past 5 years or so. And for some international banks, apart from complying with local Hong Kong regulatory requirements for other reasons, they also have to follow the head office or some overseas regulatory requirements as well. So therefore, as Mina had mentioned, there is this de-risking situation. And the Hong Kong MA had adopted a certain response and measures, such as contacting the different sectors of stakeholders, including the bank associations, the investment promotion office, to gather more actual information so that we can go back to the relevant banks and follow up with them. You would have noticed that among the different banks, they have actually come up with different measures to improve their bank opening procedures and to make it more efficient. Some of them have shortened the time period necessary. Some have given service pledges, and where there are unsuccessful cases, they will provide a review mechanism for their customers. Perhaps in this regard, May can provide more information. I would also want to point out the following, and that is a number of local and international banks in developing SME business. They have done a lot of work in that regard. Perhaps it's time for May to talk about the banking operations. Yes, please be brief. We have very limited time.
Thank you very much for the question. As a banking industry, we're very committed to supporting the small and medium-sized enterprises. I think in answer to your question about the difficulties, since the start of the year, we have instructed the banks to better implement the risk-based approach and look at their internal policies and procedures. We have also asked for greater transparency so that on the website, it is very clear what the bank's requirements are, so that when customers go, they have the information and documents that they need. We have also asked the members to enhance the frontline training just to make sure that the customer experience is improved, and also the key is escalating the difficult cases. In addition, we are also working with customers so that they can track where their account opening request, where they've got to. And then finally, we are working with the Hong Kong MA on things like what Mina described, the Know Your Customers utilities, and also non-face-to-face type opening. So a lot of work has been done, and we will endeavor to do much more for the SMEs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. 下一位係盧偉國議員。
多謝主席。主席嘅
Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chair. For this particular issue, there are two aspects which I have personal experience in, one of which is difficulty in opening a bank account. Well, among professionals, we have formed a very small entity, and basically we organize activities, and from time to time we will have to collect certain payments in terms of checks. And these are professionals who have very good track record. Now, there is a bank, well, I will not name the bank, but it is a very big bank in Hong Kong, and we'll all think of it when we talk about big banks, and they have an SME center. And it took us half a year for us to open the bank account for this small group. And if this is quality service, then I'm at a loss as to what that actually means. And also, there are certain procedures which are unreasonable and are uncalled for. Now, I have at this very big bank a long-term bank account, and basically it is to operate the LegCo receipts and also payments for fees. And therefore, you can imagine there would not be a lot of balance in that account. But it's surprising that I got a letter from the bank saying that I have to fill out certain information. And the police had urged that we do not lightly trust this kind of request. And it was to be sent back to a PO box, and I was really suspicious. And so I waited a bit to see whether it is indeed so. But, you know, my wife's account was actually frozen, and it caused us a lot of trouble. And every day we had to spend very thriftily because our bank account was frozen. So we went to the bank branch for inquiries, and even the managers were at a loss as to what it's about. And they had to go to their seniors to ask about the situation. And they said that this is probably so that the account's been frozen. And then we've been asked to fill in all sorts of forms and go through procedures in order to open up the bank account again. I mean, the form asks about decades of financial information, including whether you've participated in art pieces auctions. I do not know whether this is part of de-risking and due diligence work. I mean, from the bank's point of view, they want to be as detailed as possible, asking questions that not even the Inland Revenue Department would ask. I do not know who's going to answer that question. I mean, while we want to minimize risk, but at the same time, we do not want to cause undue disturbance and trouble to the citizens of Hong Kong. I do not think that this kind of procedures would actually be necessary for de-risking.
My understanding is your question is about the difficulties experienced by associations and other organizations in opening bank accounts and even having accounts closed and seeking a lot of information. We have heard these concerns, and we ourselves are concerned about these issues. And the fact is that we haven't given any specific instructions to the industry about any particular customer or service or transaction to say, you know, what they shouldn't or shouldn't do. Our guidance is risk-based, to ask them to apply a risk-based approach, which requires an element of judgment. But we expect banks to apply these to assess the risk in a holistic manner and to take a balanced and proportionate approach, and which, if properly applied, should not deprive legitimate businesses, associations of the ability to open and maintain bank accounts. Now, the particular problem that you said about having to provide a lot of information going back decades, we know that some banks have, since the issuance of our circular, reviewed these processes, and the timeline is next month in December that they're going to streamline all of these, and you will not find this situation again where they have to ask you for, you know, source of wealth going back decades, and they will base largely on what the information is with the bank, and where it's deficient, then they will seek that information from customers. And we're very hopeful that this will make a big difference to all concerned. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. 下一位係李慧瓊。
Starry Lee, and would you please limit yourself to 4 minutes, including Q&A? Thank you, Chair. A lot of SMEs have expressed difficulties in opening bank accounts. Mr. Leung, Mr. Low have both spoken to that experience. They are professionals themselves, and this seems a little bit too much. To use anti-money laundering and risk control or management as excuse for the banks to make it difficult for the SMEs to have banking activities done, I think that's not right. Now, there is another group of people, including political personages, such as us. I do not know why political personages have also been included into your so-called blacklist. Well, we are not thieves. Why is it so difficult for us to open accounts? I mean, in Hong Kong, we're saying we want to set up more political parties. If you think political figures are high risk, that is not right. I mean, do you have certain information which you can share with us in this regard?
Second, I may not experience this, but family members are also included in your customer due diligence. and it may not be fair. Also, there are some owners' corporations for buildings. I don't think they are engaging in money laundering. Many owners' corporations are telling us that when they're collecting the management fees and when they're undergoing the renovation, if they use the banking services more than usual, they would be slapped a fee. And these owners' corporations are carrying out their usual transactions at the bank, and they are asked to pay a fee. Now, for these non-profit-making organizations, shouldn't you provide reasonable services? The other thing is the EMs, ethnic minorities. And because of their skin color, they were asked more questions. They would have a longer processing time for bank opening process. What is the result of your review, and how do you go about monitoring the situation? Just because you have to do AML, anti-money laundering, and so on, doesn't mean that you have to make life difficult for the profit-making organizations, politicians, and so on. Other than issuing guidelines, what else did you do? Right, let me respond to Madam Starry Lee's questions first. Our objective is to maintain Hong Kong as a place to maintain effective AML measures, while at the same time we want to have decent service for the members of the public. That remains our objective. There was a mention of the ethnic minorities. In fact, last year we had meetings or sharing sessions with the EM community, and we heard some specific cases. Last year we said that with specific cases we could liaise with the banks. We had received 8 complaints. In fact, there was no discrimination involved on the part of the banks, although there was room for improvement in actual operation, like, for instance, the requirements that they impose, and also the transparency can be increased, and that there are workshops held together with the Equal Opportunities Commission and the Banking Association to show the frontline staff as to how they should deal with or interact with the customers. There were workshops last year and this year. We have not received any complaints from the EM community since. Ms. Lee, well, perhaps she didn't have enough time to respond to the 3 groups that I referred to. Perhaps I'd like to have a reply in writing, the way in which they deal with these groupings and the measures. I don't think you're able to do anything at all at the moment. Mr. Abraham Sheikh, Chairman, thank you. Thanks very much for the opportunity to raise this issue. This is a pretty common issue in Hong Kong. The government or the regulator is really very divorced from reality. The fact remains that the problem is pretty serious in Hong Kong. There are many small-time businesses, they are finding it difficult to open an account. They're on the receiving end of your suppression. Standard Charter and HSBC, I don't mind naming the names, they have these practices, and other banks that would follow suit. 90% of the businesses, 90% of the people are working for the SMEs. If you're making life so difficult for the SMEs, for the ethnic minorities, you're not doing your job. It was on the 8th of September that you issued a circular to the banks. Why didn't you take more measures ahead of time until we raised this particular problem? This paper is really well written, but I mean this comes a little bit too late. The whole community is facing the pressure. Hong Kong people are not fond of lodging complaints, unlike people in other jurisdictions. The lack of complaints doesn't mean that you've done right. Thank you. Yes, please. Madam Chu, thank you very much for the question. At the beginning of this year, through various channels, through our working contacts, and through the media reports, and also through the Invest Hong Kong, we heard all these different comments. We fully appreciate that this is an issue that has to be dealt with. The number of complaints may not be high, but we are facing up to these issues squarely. We are following up the matter with the banking sector. Other than issuing guidelines, we've also been in touch with a lot of stakeholders, and we try to gather specifics about these different cases. Right, that was talked about before. I hope that every 6 months the Hong Kong MA would submit a report to us so that we can find out whether improvements have been made and how. Yes, next, Mr. Ronald Chen, please. Chairman, thank you. In terms of business development, the banks would like to provide efficient services and absorb as many customers as they possibly can. For the bank opening process, we've never heard complaints before until 2012, since legislation was enacted regarding AML. The customer due diligence has carried criminal liability, and the banks are very, very cautious in handling or processing accounts. And there are so many documents, a lot of documentation has to be provided. People cannot open the account because they would take time to get used to the documentation requirement. I don't think the customers and the banks are on a collision course. There can be a win-win situation. The Hong Kong MA has talked about a whole string of measures that have gone down well, and I hope that they will resort to various measures, or perhaps through the Invest Hong Kong, they would allow the customers to exercise their choices. In the light of overseas experience, there can be a KYC utility, a intermediary utility platform that can be used. Perhaps the Hong Kong MA or the government can provide resources for this to happen. And the plan there. All right. Thanks very much, Mr. Chen, for the question. Indeed, there are many areas that we can work on. We are, together with the HCAP, we're looking at various ways to gather information and update the information and to obviate the laborious procedures. We will follow up on this. The banking sector and the business community and the SMEs, there can be more contacts. Now, there is the platform of success, and that's a government platform. They will be reaching out to the SMEs and make available more information and support to the SMEs in Hong Kong. And through our cooperation with Invest Hong Kong, if companies would like to set up their presence in Hong Kong, they're unfamiliar with Hong Kong, then the banks can, through the Invest Hong Kong, reach out to these businesses, and information can be channeled through the Invest Hong Kong. Last speaker, Mrs. Regina Ip. Chairman, thank you. I have received complaints not only from the SMEs, just last month, when I attended a Jewish business forum in Singapore, I have received a lot of complaints from the Jewish SMEs. They were in the areas of finance or the IT. They ended up having to buy a shell company to start the business in Hong Kong. They said that Singapore things are more liberal. The two British banks are very stringent. DBS and Chinese banks are more liberal. Now, why has it to be the case? I think when it comes to supervision, it has to be across the board. If you are against the anti-money laundering, if you are tackling the terrorist funding, Singapore is also doing the same. And Singapore can do this kind of business, and the people approach the DBS, whereas the two large UK banks are really not doing it. All right, who's going to take the question? All right, thank you for the question. You make comparison between Hong Kong and Singapore. The market makeup and also appetite for risks and risk assessment are different. So it would be hard for us to make a comparison like with like between different markets. But the system in Hong Kong and the regulatory requirements are in keeping with international standards. From our understanding from different businesses who have business elsewhere, Hong Kong is similar to other places in terms of regulation. Perhaps May can talk about this regarding the standards.
Your question. I think on the question about global banks, the global banks have the same standard of KYC and AML restrictions. And it is very, very unusual for different countries, like you said, Singapore and Hong Kong, to have different rules, because otherwise there is arbitrage by the customers if they cannot open in Hong Kong to open in Singapore. So it's unlikely. But I think more to the point, since the Hong Kong MA have issued the guidelines, the Hong Kong Association of Banks have been working very closely with the member banks, and we will try to do what we can to improve the customer experience, but without degrading the standards of checks on money laundering and counter-terrorist funding. Thank you.
呢啲都係好理論嘅講法嘅啫，係嘛？即係
Well, this is all very theoretical. Everybody should abide by the same standards between Hong Kong and Singapore. But why is it that the risk assessment in Hong Kong is higher than Singapore? Hong Kong has been very compliant. The Financial Action Task Force, after 9/11, Hong Kong became the chairman of the FATF. We are held in the high esteem. Why is it that our assessment is the risk assessment is higher in Hong Kong than that in Singapore? Because Hong Kong MA is just looking at the files without knowing what's on the ground.
Honourable Member, for your question. Actually, you know, there are a lot of banks in Hong Kong, and not all of them have the same risk appetite. It is acknowledged that international banks are not only subject to Hong Kong requirements, but also requirements of their head office as well as overseas regulators. And in this respect, the HKMA has tried very much to see where the inconsistencies are, to try and achieve a consistent approach. Precisely for the reason that May explained, that we don't want arbitrage. We don't want people to be able to go to Singapore and not come to Hong Kong, because Hong Kong is an international financial center and we're very much open for business. And the concerns of money laundering and terrorist financing are universal. And, you know, the standards shouldn't vary, really. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, then. My thanks to everyone for joining the panel meeting. Thank you all very much. Let's move on to the last item, and that is the levy on insurance premiums.
而家要唔要講延多15分鐘？好啦，我哋
All right, let's invite the administration to brief us on the paper. Chairman, thank you. This is a legislative proposal. In July 2015, LegCo enacted the Insurance Companies Amendment Ordinance, and we had subsidiary legislation to be submitted regarding the details of operation. This proposal is about the financial arrangement of the IIA. Now, when the consultation document mentioned this financial arrangement, the sources of funding would be from the levy of the premium that would take up 70% of the revenue, and there is also the authorization fees and other fees, and they take up 30%, and there would be injection from the government. In December last year, the LegCo injected $650 million for the establishment of the IIA. Now, in 2005, we commissioned a consultancy. We hope that the IIA will have a steady source of income, and hence this proposal. We have fine-tuned some of the proposals. We don't really want this to be too disruptive to the policyholders. And also, will make life easier for the insurance companies that would be collecting the levy for the government or for the IIA. Would like to have a tacit understanding with the trade that they would be able to upgrade their computer system. A couple of points there. I mentioned the 70% of the levy, and also the other 30% of the authorization fee. We are proposing 0.1%, $1 per $1,000, in other words, and that will be a progressive approach. We don't really want to make cause too much of an impact on the policyholders. The rate is on the low side. There are two fees. One is $300,000 per year, and the other one is fluctuating depending on the asset. The larger the insurance company, the authorization fee would be higher. And there is a cap of $7 million in this regard. For other user fees, there are applications with the IIA, or for instance, if someone wants to search information about the insurance company or want a list of certain members, that they would be chargeable to a fee on the basis of cost recovery. And this is some general outline of the paper. I welcome members' questions. Mr. Chen Kim-po, Chairman, thank you. Now, members can see that the levy is pretty low, 0.1% beyond or up to 2021. I don't think that would have any impact on the desire to take out insurance.
Well, this is something new for the industry, so they will have to do something with the computer system and also the systems. I'd like to thank the administration for being very accommodating, discussing about the levy especially. While I'm saying it is also very expensive in certain cases, 18,000, 50,000, or even 100,000. But then this is a product of mutual discussion and concessions. I think that is acceptable. However, There are guidelines as to how the levy will be charged, and I hope you will draw up the guidelines quick and take them up with the industry so they can get prepared. And then the public will also have to understand whether this will be paid by the public or the insurance companies. Of course, this is a public levy. I hope the administration can communicate this sufficiently with the public. How is it going to be charged, when it will be charged, and what is the upper limit, etc. And also, I hope the administration can talk more about the IIA later on at the Bills Committee. We hope to be able to also look at the guidelines, because the IIA will become operational by the first or second quarter next year. I hope you will get yourselves prepared. Does any other member wish to speak? Can we allow the Undersecretary to make a reply? Or actually, the Deputy Secretary, with regard to the detailed arrangements about the levy, we have already had meetings with the Hong Kong Federation of Insurers, and we have already resolved a lot of issues. As Mr. Chan said, we will talk to the IIA in order to issue guidelines to facilitate compliance with the industry. Publicity is extremely important. This is a new levy, and we hope the public can understand the purpose of the levy. We have promised with the industry that the government and the IIA will discuss whether we are going to set up a hotline to allow the public to understand when the levy will be charged and how it will be charged. As to subsidiary legislation of the IIA, we are working at full steam on those. I hope Mr. Chen will understand that the IIA is now recruiting personnel. Before they set up their team, the FSTB, wherever possible, is helping to do advance work so that we can draw up the guidelines as quickly as possible, and also the subsidiary legislation can be prepared ASAP. And I can guarantee to Mr. Chan that we are going to work at full steam on these. Any other questions or comments from members, please? If not, we will end our discussion of this item. We thank you for coming. We are very efficient. Thank you. If there is nothing under AOB, the meeting is adjourned.